Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining this webinar. Today we're going to look at the risk and business planning workshops that we've been delivering across the country as part of a Defra project funded by the EU Conditional Aid. The idea of this is to look at the risks and to look at different ways of business planning for our businesses, but also for enabling you to access some fully funded one-to-one consultancy. This should then enable you to look at really getting into the risks of your business and seeing how we can manage the effects of them upon you and trying to minimise those. What we're going to do today is to look at some of the risks that affect your business and importantly how we might go about thinking about dealing with those. We're also going to look at knowing where you want to take your business. If you're thinking about the risks and thinking about making changes to your business, it's very important to know whether that's going to be a good or a bad thing for your business. And the best way of doing that is to know where you want to take your business in the first place. On from that, what we hope to do then is to be able to look at getting some areas of particular focus that you want to work on. That's where you'd look to bring into the one-to-one consultancy want to take part in this. The consultancy is designed to take you on a step from those focus areas to really come up with an action plan for particularly your business and for you. The idea then is to be able to bring yourself together with the people who've been to the live workshops back together around the country to look at whether there's some really practical things that we as AHDB can support you to do, but also areas that we can signpost you to further. This is all, as I said, fully funded by the Defra initiative, so it's a really good chance to take advantage of it. So let's start having a little bit of a think about what does affect your business. What are the risks that you are facing? The breadth and depth of the risks, unfortunately, is quite many and varied, whether it be looking at fluctuations in the cost of input, whether it be thinking about consumer perception and the preferences across all the different livestock sectors. We might be thinking about changes in fiscal policy, so thinking about interest rates and exchange rates. Alternatively, we might be thinking about competition for land, so whether we're thinking about the availability of tenancies or the security of the tenancy we're in, or whether we're looking at competition from other sectors or even from AD plants. And of course, as we're facing Brexit, we've also got the possibility of thinking about changes in our subsidy and support regime. So what effect would it have on your business if the basic payments dropped out tomorrow? Have you done a budget to see what effect that would have on your business? So there are loads and loads of risks that affect our business. And how do you know what to think about first? There are so many different things to try and tackle. We could just try and do the things that are going to be quick and easy, because let's be honest, a quick win is good for the soul. Or we probably should be thinking about tackling some of the things that have a massive effect on our business. But how do we know what to pick at first? Well, the big thing is to make sure you have got everything. So I said about the fact that there's lots of risks that are there for your business. Well, how about putting them into some headings so that we can make sure that we're thinking about the full breadth of what there is. So thinking about the sort of things that are production risks, so weather being a big one we haven't mentioned. Now, if we're looking at markets and prices and we're thinking about that supply and demand, that's those prices of inputs as well as outputs. People, they're a massive benefit to our businesses, but they're also quite a big risk to our business. Whether it be family or employed people. Now, I'm not talking about them leaving being a risk or something, you know, breaking something might be a risk, but them being a cost to our business as opposed to an investment to our business. So making sure we're investing in our staff, that we've got the communication structures, but also family. Family can be a massive benefit, but it can also be a constraint if the communication structure isn't there. And thinking about succession, you know, what might happen if somebody died as part of the family? What impact would that have as a business? Obviously, there's the financial side of it to think about as well. We've talked about interest rates. The flip side of interest rates being really low at the moment is potentially borrowings could be quite cheap. So there are also benefits to be seen. So if you looked at something as potentially quite negative, if you think about the flip side of it, actually there can be benefits to different things that we might term as risks, but actually should be seen as opportunities. And this is quite about mindset. So having a think about, okay, we've got this long list potentially of things we think are a risk to our business. Actually, how can we turn that into an opportunity for our business? Is there an advantage we can take of a situation? Are we well placed to be able to do that? And that's that sort of change of mindset I'd like us to try and think about today, taking it away from it being a risk and a problem, but actually saying, okay, how can I make this an opportunity for myself and really meet that challenge head on? So one of the things we have to think about if we've got this long list is, you know, what do we tackle first? Like I said, one of the ways to be able to think about that is to try and plot all of those lists of risks we've just talked about into something like this, which is a very simple matrix. Now, this should be one of the documents that you've been able to download from the web page where you access this webinar. If you haven't downloaded and printed these documents off, don't worry, just pause me, go away and print these off so you've got them to write on, because what I would like you to do is think about some of those risks we've just mentioned and perhaps jot a few down on a separate piece of paper. And then think about for you and your business where you would plot them on this little matrix of squares. So for instance, what we're trying to look at is what is the likelihood of something happening, whether it's not very likely to happen or whether actually it's fairly certain. And we're going to plot that. So if you take something certain, we're going to plot that then against how severe the impact is going to be. So not very much of an impact to a very severe out of business sort of impact. Now, for this, we are just looking at the moment about financial risk, but you could definitely and should think about the other types of risk that would be significant to you in your business. So if you're selling, produce, there's a reputational risk to some things. There's also a risk of morale being severely impacted. So although we're going to focus on the financial impact here, there are other sorts of impact that you need to think about when you're looking at the different risks or opportunities that are facing your business. So for instance, by way of example, if I just take you through something that I feel is fairly certain. Now, apologies if you are easily upset, but if you've been through one of the workshops with me, you would know this. But I like to look and think about things in quite a blunt way to make sure that we have full discussions. And part of thinking about that is thinking about something that's fairly certain. So I would like to talk about death. Now, if you had a death in the family, we have to think, or in the business, we have to think about what impact it would have. So we know that that's fairly certain to happen. So we know it's going to be somewhere up this line here. And we have to think about what sort of impact it would have. Now, if it was the farm cat or one pig, one lamb, one beef animal, the impact could be fairly limited. So you'd be putting it down as a monitor box. We'd want to be making sure that we looked at our animal health to make sure that it was consistently good. However, if we are talking about a family member or a business member, then the impact could start to be slightly higher. So we could be, depending on what the structures you've got in place are, we could be looking at some really quite significant financial distress put on the business. Now, that all depends, like I said, on what sort of structures you've got in place. So, for instance, if you haven't got wills set out, if you don't have a business structure that's set out and written down, it can cause not only massive emotional distress, but really financial significant impacts to you. Is the bank account going to be frozen? It's the simplest of things, but if you can't actually buy feed in, then this has a big impact to your business. All we're ever trying to do, once we've plotted where a risk fits, is to try and move it out of this red box effectively and into these monitor boxes. So we can't move death away from a certain likelihood of it happening. So what we have to do is try and reduce the impact so that we can move it down into this monitor box down here. Now, the way we can do that is to put in wills, to have communication with the rest of our family to make sure they know what's going to happen if somebody passes away, to have communication across the business so that if somebody, if a key member of the business does go out, then actually operations can continue. People do know who to call, do know what to do. But also to have those business structures really put in place, having a partnership agreement in place, having a corporate business structure, so that actually, although we can never take away the emotional stress of it and the stress of it, we can at least try and reduce the impact on the business so that we can focus on things that are more important at that time. Now, that's quite a severe example I've just given you, but it's a really important thing to consider and talk about and make sure you have those discussions with the family as a business. But what I would really like you to do is just spend a couple of minutes, and you can pause please, so you don't have to listen to me for too much longer, to just be able to plot in a couple of the risks that you might have jotted down on some paper and to see where you'd put them. Would you put them in a high risk area, or would you, be able to plot them into one of these monitor and low risk areas? So what we're trying to do is look at the likelihood and then plot that against the impact. And then we'll try and think about how we can move out of this high priority box. So just take a couple of minutes to plot some areas for me. Okay, so we have had a think about what those risks might be, and we've had a go at plotting them into that matrix. But like I said, the important thing is we want to be able to try and get out of that red box, so try and get out of that high priority risk box. And the way we can do that is to looking at different ways in which we might be able to manage the impact, reduce that impact, or reduce the likelihood of those risks. So let's have a look at some ways in which we might do this. Now, hopefully, again, this is one of the other sheets that you will have been able to print out, so you can keep it safe and use it another day. But this is our 5 pillars of risk management. Now, there are some really important bits on this, and 2 of the most important bits would be the floor and the roof, if I'm very honest. So the key words for me in this diagram is the word adaptability. It's great having a plan, but if you then are so fixated on your plan and your direction that when stuff changes around you, you're not able to adapt and change with it, then that can be quite detrimental to your business. And also the roof with having a strategy and objectives. Like I said earlier, if you don't know where you want to take your business, it's very difficult for you to decide whether something is going to be good or bad for it. So those 2 bits withstanding, what I really want to talk to you about for the next little section is the 5 pillars that are holding up the roof. So they are relentless cost management, market engagement, a collaborative approach, commercial acumen, and technical excellence. Now, I'm going to take you through those 5 pillars one by one, so we can just have a little bit of a think and a process of thought around each of those individually. Relentless cost management. It would be fair to say that cost management possibly isn't the most sexy topic. And it would also be fair to say that I would suggest everybody probably in the last 18 months has been able to reduce their cost of production. They've had to, basically, whether you be in milk or in pork or in beef and lamb, it has been a hard time for the livestock sectors, and survival has actually meant that people have had to really reduce costs. Even where they've reduced it before, they've had to keep going. Now, some of that has been unsustainable. So some of that cost reduction has been through reducing labour. It has been through not doing some larger projects. And it's been through not doing repairs and maintenance to elements of the business. Now, some of that has to come back in. So we know that some of the costs are going to go back up. But what tends to happen when we get paid slightly more for the product we're producing is that we just take the pressure off ourselves a little bit, and we're not quite so relentless with the cost management. And the key here is the relentlessness. So it's continuing to make these phone calls, to compare different prices for inputs and for services that you might be taking. Because although not everybody is going to be able to get down to I know this is a milk example, but if you looked at beef and lamb and pork, the trends would be the same. And no, not everybody is not going to be able to get down to the cost of production of farmer C. But if you can be relentless on your cost of production and even get you from the position to farmer B, for instance, it will mean that you spend less time with a cost of production that is above what you'll be being paid for your product. I can't say that you're never going to spend that time there, but if you can reduce that time, then you know that your recovery will be quicker as well. So that when the price does come back up, you can be back into a positive situation much quicker. One way to look at this is to think about your costs and the prices you've been paid over a longer period of time. So if we just look at this graph quickly, again, I know it's a dairy example, but I assure you that the patterns would be very similar across all the livestock sectors. If we look at the blue jagged line, that is the monthly milk price being paid. And we can see that it's quite spiky. It goes up and down. There's about 17 pence worth of difference between the top and the bottom. And over that period of time, there'll be different times when people were in and out of profit. If we look at even the 12-month rolling average, which is the red line, we start to see those peaks and troughs smoothed out a little bit more. Again, when we look at the 3-year average, which is the grey line, we smooth out an awful lot more, and we're now looking at sort of 5 pence top to bottom. But when we look at that 5-year rolling average for the price that was paid for milk in this instance, we start to see a really flat line. So if we thought about our costs in the same way, what has been the average cost you have paid over the last 5 years for your input? Was your cost of production for the last 5 years, on average, greater or smaller than the price you were paid? If your cost of production was bigger than, was higher than the price you were paid for whatever you're producing, on average over the 5 years, you really have to have a conversation with yourself and the others involved in your business as to whether actually you can continue to do this. It's dangerous to look at when you are at the bottom of a market and your cost of production is obviously higher than the price you're being paid, and to make a decision then. But if you know on average you can actually make good money, then hopefully you can see through to weather until the price rises again. But if we're looking at that longer term picture, you still know that you're not on average covering your cost of production for what you're producing, then it is time, unfortunately, to look at whether you should be doing it, or whether you need to make wholesale changes to your cost base. Could you actually be doing what you're doing differently to reduce your initial cost base? The trouble with the cost of management stuff is it's relentless, and that's the issue, like I said earlier. Making those phone calls, spending that time in the office, spending the time comparing. So even if we're looking at comparing insurance, that can be really quite a boring thing to do, and actually comparing different insurance schedules can be quite difficult to do. However, we can be looking at spending a couple of hours or half a day doing something that's going to save us potentially £2,000. Now, you don't even need to change insurers, for instance, to get that saving. So one of the ladies that came on a workshop was explaining how some of the partners in her business wanted to go and change insurers, and other people didn't. So they had to have a bit of a compromise. They looked around, and if they changed insurers, they could save £700. However, just by going back to their current insurer and saying, okay, look what I can get elsewhere, their current insurer still reduced their price by £500 without them having to go anywhere, and so they retained that level of service that they were so worried about leaving. But they couldn't have done that if they hadn't have had that informed conversation. And so that's what it's really about, making sure you continue to be as relentless on cost management as if we're in the pit of a crisis. Okay, so I showed you this graph a little bit, looking at market engagement. I used it as an example of looking at your business over a longer period of time, but it also you need to look at it as a sense of knowing what the market you're engaged in does. How does it fluctuate? What's the time scale over which it fluctuates? How low does the pit go that I need to be able to make sure I have enough put by to be able to withstand the worst times in our business? It's also about thinking about what are you producing. So are you producing what your buyer is actually asking? So in milk terms, it's are you optimizing your contract? Are you optimizing the butter fat, the protein, and the cleanliness of your milk? If we're looking at beef and lamb, are we talking to the people that are buying our sheep or our beef? Are we selling live? Are we selling dead? Are we meeting the carcass specs that we're being asked to? And the same if we're looking at pork. Pork has been doing for a lot longer, a very specific carcass spec, and they're much more used to the boxes of having to get into to get that consistent product. And that is where we're looking to take beef and lamb more. So it's really working with your buyers to make sure that you know what they're after, and also the people that that are supplying you. Making sure that you've got that relationship to be able to understand, they understand what you require as well, so that effectively we can shorten some of the slack in the supply chain and really optimize what we're doing. Part of that thought about relationships is around this collaborative approach. Now, you might think that having a collaborative approach and working with suppliers and working with people that are buying from you actually sort of flies in the face of that relentless cost management. It doesn't, because if you've got a good working relationship with somebody, they're going to know and appreciate the fact that you need to look across different suppliers to see what prices you can get for stuff. And actually, if you've got a good relationship with somebody, they'll be supporting you to do that. So it's about you talking with the suppliers that are working with you. It's not just about cost. So we do have to think about service level. For some people, the service level that they get from the supplier will be more important than others. So, for instance, if you're somebody that goes to the feed bin and knocks on the side of it and goes, oh, crike, I need feed and I need it tomorrow, you might be paying a little bit more, but that service level is the thing that's really important to you. You need to get into a situation where you can find that there's good things for both people, so there's a win-win into it. And working with your contractor is a really good example of this. So, for instance, using a 13th payment system with your contractor can work really well. It's something that reduces potentially his cash flow issues or her cash flow issues, because they have a monthly income coming in to be able to service HP payments and other bills that they've got. You've also got a win on your cash flow because there's no lumpy contractor payments to come out of it. But it also gets you a little bit of buy-in so that you can work to get the contractor on site when you like them, so that you get that quality of silage come into the plant. But one thing I would say is never underestimate the power of cake and paying on time. And again, it's that part of that relationship, making sure that you both get something from it. It's also a collaborative approach, is also thinking about working with your other farmers. So are you in a buying group, for instance, which can take some of the pressure off when we're thinking about cost management. Are you in a producer group, or are you potentially sharing some kit with somebody else? Now, I think there's probably an awful lot of informal arrangements that go on across the country, especially when we're looking at sharing of kit. But there's a couple of things that I would say to take heed of. Have an agreement on repairs and maintenance, and have an agreement on what you do with the disposal of the kit. So if you sell it, who gets what where. And also try thinking about sharing a piece of kit that you potentially aren't going to both want at the same time. So we try and alleviate some of that conflict and have something written down. Okay, but it can be really worthwhile doing. Even if you're just sharing like a trailer and a set of rolls, it's still 2 pieces of kit that you don't have to hold completely on your own. So another thing to think about is this business acumen thing. So are we treating our business as a way of life, or a real straight commercial business? Now, the reality is actually it's a bit of both. But should we be thinking about taking a little more control of our business and making sure we run it as opposed to it running us? What I would like you to do is just to take a little bit of time to fill in this little questionnaire. All you need to do is have a little read through it. It's, again, one of the documents you should have been able to download and print off ready for this webinar. And I would like you to go through and tick everything that you do. If you have to think about it, let's be honest, you probably don't do it. So just go through and put me on pause and tick everything that you do. Okay, so we've been through the questionnaire. How did you get on? So basically, this is not something to beat yourself up over. If you scored more than 17 ticks, congratulations, you're doing very well. If you didn't, don't panic. All you need to do is to go through and put a little star next to something that you think you would like to do. Is there something on there that you would like to do in the future to improve yourself and your business? It's about thinking about, should there be routine business meetings? And by this, I don't necessarily mean the meeting you have every morning over breakfast or and lunch. What I'm on about for these is about perhaps having all of the staff team that are involved as part of these business meetings, looking at data, looking at targets, seeing whether you're achieving those targets, and just thinking about how we're going to take our business forward and how we're going to meet some of the challenges that are coming up. Not really just about that day. That's important, but if we're going to have some routine business meetings, then I think we need to think a little bit further forward. And we need to understand actually why something hasn't worked previously and what we can do to improve that going forward. Now, if you are home alone, so to speak, so sole trader, doesn't mean you have to have a meeting of one sat in your office, but utilise those people that come into your business and actually are part of your business team. So whether that be your vet, your nutritionist, your agronomist, your consultant, your bank manager, your accountant. These guys see a lot going across different businesses and actually will have some interesting insight to bring to you. I mentioned having targets. Setting yourself some objectives and some targets to monitor against is really important, and we'll come to that a little bit more as we go through. Thinking about budgeting, having a budget that is not just done for the bank manager and then put in a drawer. Something that you can use, something that you can put actuals against, that you can actually track how you're doing. Having something in your pocket, so having something written down and in your pocket means it's an awful lot harder to avoid it and to make excuses than if you've got something that's just held in your head. Okay, so technical excellence. This is the easy bit. This is the bit that as farmers you are all fully aware of. This is your thing you do every day, the bread and butter of farming. It's the actual doing of the production. If I said to you to think about one thing that you're working on in terms of technical production currently, you could all come up with something absolutely instantly off the top of your head that you're working towards. And I would suggest to you that we should be able to do that for all of the other elements that we've just been talking about. So whether it be cost management, whether it be being collaborative, whether it be looking at how we work with others and understand our market that we're operating in. It doesn't matter what it is, we should be able to come up with something that we are working on for all of these 5 pillars of risk management, because we should be constantly striving to take ourselves forward. But should you need that support on the technical excellence, it's something as, of course, as AHDB, we're renowned for having technical support, so please do come to us. Now, I alluded to the fact that if you have something that is in your pocket, something that's written down, something you can see, it's an awful lot easier, a lot harder to get away from it and to ignore it. So I'm a big advocate of getting people to write stuff down. So I would really like you to write some stuff down with me. So this is another of the forms that you could download from the website. If you haven't already done so, please pause me and go and print that off, because we do need to get you to fill this in and have a think about it. This is a risk register, and it just takes us on a little step further from the coloured matrix we were looking at earlier. So all we're going to do is, instead of putting the risk in one of the coloured boxes, what we're going to do is we're going to write it down here. Again, we're going to score it for out of 5 for how likely it is to happen, and then how severe that impact might be on our business. We multiply those 2 figures by each other, and that gives us a risk factor, which gives us a bit of an indication of how big our impact is going to be on our business and how quickly we should really get on looking at it. And then we're going to, the important part is to have a think about how we might go about either reducing the likelihood of it happening or the severity of its impact to it. And we're going to use those 5 pillars. Here we go. I'm going to use those 5 pillars that we just talked about. So we're going to think about the relentless cost management, anything we can do in terms of market engagement, how we might be able to look at collaboration as a way to reduce risk or reduce impact. Is there something we can do in the way we manage our business in terms of commercial acumen that will help reduce perhaps the severity of the impact? And what can we do around technical excellence? So there'll be quite a bit actually around technical excellence for reducing the likelihood of things happening to our business. So, like I said, take this worksheet and let's just put in, let's say, the 3 biggest risks that you think about that are facing you and your business. Write them down for me in terms of what the risk is. Give it a ranking out of 5 for how likely it is to happen, how severe the impact is likely to be. Multiply those 2 figures by each other to give yourself a risk factor. And importantly then, using that those 5 pillars of risk management to think about how we can either reduce the impact of the risk or the likelihood of it happening. At this point, I'd also like you to have a little bit of a think about, is there an elephant in your room that you are trying to avoid? So is there something in your heart of hearts you know is going to be quite a big implication to your business you haven't put down? It's only you right now that's going to be looking at this piece of paper, so be brave and put that thing down and have a little think about how you might manage it. Again, if you were those headings I talked about, to make sure you're thinking about the different elements of risk, these are here for you to just give you a little bit of a prompt to make sure you're thinking wide enough and not just going with the obvious things around price, but just have a little bit of a think, and we can put me on pause and give you some time to write down how you think you might be able to mitigate some of that risk. So either reducing the likelihood or the severity of impact using these 5 pillars. Okay, so we've thought about the risks that are facing our business. We've had to think about how we might prioritise which ones to tackle first, so i.e. the ones that ended up in that red box. They're the things we probably want to work on first. Then we've had a little bit of a think about all the different elements we might use. So there's 5 pillars of risk management to try and think about how we might reduce the severity of the risk, or sorry, the severity of the impact or the likelihood of it happening. Those are all really great things, and what I want to take us on to next is almost to help to build on that, is that thought process I mentioned earlier of having a clear strategy and objectives of where you're taking your business so that you can decide whether something is good or bad for your business. Now, if we are thinking about management words, for instance, there's an awful lot of words out there, whether it's purpose, vision, mission statements, strategy. At the end of the day, all they are really asking you is, what is it you want to achieve? And then how do you want to achieve it? So looking at goals, strategy and objectives. All we're asking is what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. If you know what you want and where you want to go, then it's a lot easier to decide how you can best get there. So we are going to do a little bit of thinking about things to make us happy. So there were some additional pages that you could print out, or if you haven't got them, you can just jot this down on plain paper. But I would like you to think about some of the things that make you happy as a person. So this is not farming related, that'll come a little bit later, I promise. But this is thinking about what makes you happy as a person. So it might be time with family, it might be walks along the beach, it might be hiking up a hill, it might be good food, it might be wine or good company, or it might be going on nice sunny holidays, or it might be going to find quiet spaces in part of Wales. Whatever it is, just write it down and take a couple of minutes to think about and write down what makes you happy. Okay, so generally, when we've been doing these workshops, there has been loads of different things that people put down that make them happy, but the common themes that come out of them are the fact that ultimately there are two elements that you need to enable you to do the things that make you happy. One being time and the other being money. Now, the ratio of how much time to money you need is a very, very personal thing. What we found was an awful lot of people would be very happy if there wasn't a great deal of money, because the things that they valued were very much time related. But actually, money sometimes can help us enable us to get more time back. So we have to think about that ratio for us as individuals and for yourself as to what makes you, what sort of level of time versus money you require to be able to do the things that make you happy. Okay, so if you put that piece of paper to a side, you should have another piece of paper in front of you now. And that asks you what you enjoy about farming. So I would love you to do the same thing for me, to write down some things that make you happy about farming. So it could be seeing new livestock born. It could be ploughing a field. It could be finding a solution to a tricky problem. It could be fixing things. It could be working with your family. So just take a couple of minutes to write down what makes you happy about farming. Okay, so again, during the workshops, there was a lot of common things that came out, and it was, I'd be very surprised if you haven't got similar things on your list. And it revolved around being able to have a community that they were working in, and to be able to enjoy the countryside and live in the countryside, as well as all the bits I mentioned previously. And it's really important that actually we don't forget these things that make us happy about farming. Sometimes it can be really tough, and it can be very hard work. And so it's important that we remember, as we take our businesses forward, that we build in the things that we enjoy about farming, that we make sure we still got time to do those things and to enjoy those things. Because we need to be able to make sure that we keep ourselves motivated, so that we can take everybody else forward as well. Okay, so this is the next question I've got for you, and I would like to know what is the purpose of what you're doing? So why are you doing it? Is it about passion, taking you forward from where you are now? Is it about handing it down to the next generation? Or actually, is it about building a pot so that you can exit when you choose to? And we have to sort of ask ourselves a few questions. What are we currently doing? Is it the right thing to be doing? Do we want to do it? That's the really important thing. Is it hitting all your happy buttons we talked about just? Should you be doing it? So just have a little think and write down for me what the purpose is. So why you are doing what you are doing currently in your business. Okay, so this can be quite a hard question. And if you haven't got yourselves to a full answer, that's fine. Don't be worried about that. But it definitely is something that we want you to carry on thinking about as you go forward. Now, the one thing I haven't put on this little list here is actually that self-fulfillment and enjoyment element. I don't put it down through the workshops because it would be the thing that everybody goes to as their first safety net. And it's really true, and it's really important that we understand that actually the farming and livestock sector, it's really important to do it because we love it and because we want to have that in our lives. We have to remember that actually sometimes we're not the only one in the business, and we have to make sure that we understand what's driving the other people in our business as well. So what is the purpose? What are the things that make them happy too? If you've got one person in a business that is driven by the fact that they just enjoy it so much and they love it, but actually they're not at all concerned about the level of money it leaves them to do other things. Yet you've got another person in that business that really struggles with the stress of not having a great deal of money, then you can be completely at odds, even though that you both want to farm and want to take the business forwards. If there's no communication between those two people, it can then be very, very destructive to the business. So it's really important to check with the other people in your business what makes them happy, what they enjoy about farming, the reasons that they're doing it, to make sure actually we can find a common ground where everybody can work together to take that business forward. And it satisfies everybody's bits of what makes them happy and what's driving them. So this is my last question to you. And I would like you to write down what you're good at. Now, when you send your papers in, I should be very disappointed if I don't see on them something written down under what you're good at. But as it's turned out, as we've gone through the workshops, this has been the hardest question of all. So I just want you to have a little bit of think about what you're good at and write down on a piece of paper for me. Okay, so hopefully you came up with something and you didn't have to think about right the way back to your school reports for what you're good at. But you should remember that we're all very guilty of this, of being quite self-deprecating and not giving ourselves credit for how good we are at stuff. And as farmers and livestock people, we are so incredibly multi-skilled and talented. There are elements in what we do that any big company would love to have on our executive boards, on their executive board, in terms of decision making, delegating, problem solving, communicating, thinking outside of the box, and coming up and embracing challenge. But we just take for granted because it's just what we do as part of our everyday. And we need to remember that actually we're highly skilled and highly capable people, and that just because our industry sometimes may be faced with issues doesn't mean we can't come through and absolutely thrive. Okay, so I would like us now to use the happy pages, as I would call them. So what makes you happy, what do you enjoy about farming, what is your purpose, what are you good at. I would like you to use those 4 pages to help us come up with a vision for our business and our future. Now, admittedly, this is your vision, not everybody that's involved in your business's vision. So again, we need to make sure that we cross-check with other people. But for now, I just want you to come up with your vision. I would like you to come up with a mental picture of what you would like your business to be and how you would like it to be in, let's say, 5 to 10 years' time. You know that your time frame is a little bit shorter, then let's just go for 2. And I would like you to write it down. So just coming up with a couple of sentences that describes your vision for your business. we're going to be writing this in the very centre of the full circle, so just where the red circle is. Again, this is another of the worksheets you should have been able to print off. If you haven't done so, then please do pause me, go and print it off. And I would like you to just write a sentence or two in the middle of that circle that just describes the mental image of where you would like your business to be. So some examples of vision for it might be an expanding business that gives 4 weeks holiday a year to all the partners. Or it might be a business that enables me to exit with a lot of cash to be able to buy the property where I want and when I want. It might be a business that my family can take on if they wish. Or it might be, mad into genetics, it might be a business that sells genetics all over the world. They're quite top line. None of them say thou shalt be a dairy farmer, thou shalt be a pig farmer. They're just about giving you a guiding principle as to where you want to take your business. So just write down for me, like I said, in the centre of this circle, a couple of sentences or a sentence that describes where you want your business to be in 5 to 10 years' time. Now, if you can't come up to the whole sentences, that's fine. Just start with a few keywords that work. Okay, so we've got our vision, and that's fantastic. That is something for you to continue to work on. I think that's probably something that tends to develop a little bit as you think about it, and especially as you have conversations with the other people that are key in your business, so that you can come up with a joint vision that works for everybody. But how are we going to achieve it? So we've done the what we want to achieve. Now we're going to think a little bit about the how we're going to achieve it. So this is our little bit of a strategy or a plan of action for how we're going to achieve it. So that sheet I gave you we looked at just now with the vision we put in the middle, that's a planning wheel. And what we want to do now is to use all of the worksheets we've worked on today. So we're going to take the coloured square matrix that we looked at first. We're going to take the questionnaire that we looked at, especially thinking about the areas that we want to work on. We're going to take the risk register, so where we wrote down some of the risks we're facing, but also thinking about the ways we're going to manage those risks, importantly, and also having a little bit of a think about what some of the opportunities that those risks might be posing us. And we're going to take that with our vision and think about what are the areas that we want to work on. So on that planning wheel, you'll see there's I've circled in red on the screen. So you'll see around the outside there's some focus areas written. What I want you to do is just pop it in there for me. 2 or 3 will be absolutely fine. The areas you feel you need to work on in order to achieve your vision. Now, more than likely, they're going to be coming out of those 5 pillars of risk management. So just take a couple of minutes to use all the worksheets you have in front of you, thinking about those 5 pillars, and just name for me 3 key areas that you think you would like to work on in order to achieve your vision, because they're either blocking you or you need to improve them. Okay, so some examples might have been around these different areas. If you have struggled, then just pop down a couple that you think would be most relevant to you. But I'm fairly confident, having been through the workshops, that you will have easily identified some areas that you know you need to work on in order to get to that vision. So we've sort of have come to the end of this little session on the webinar. But there are some things that I would encourage you to do should you decide this is the end and you don't want to progress any further with the consultancy, etc. I would love you to complete that risk register. So there's 2 sides to it, so fill it up and you can print off more if you need to, but make sure you put in the risks and how likely they are and the severity of the impact. But most importantly, think about using those 5 pillars to identify ways to either reduce that risk or reduce the severity of the impact. And then really key, make sure you write down who's going to do it. So there's a little column on the end that says, who's responsible. Put someone's name in there, pin it up where people can see it. Like I said, if it's written down, you're much more likely to avoid it, less likely to avoid it. Okay, then I would really love you to use those visions to help you make decisions. So basically, if you're thinking about doing something or buying something, ask yourself, does it take me closer or further away from my vision? If it's taking you further away from your vision, you need to have a serious think about whether you should be doing it. The next bit is, underneath where we wrote those focus areas, we need to start coming up with some objectives, some targets, basically, as to how we need to improve it and to what level. So make sure we've got some targets in there that we can record against so we know whether we're achieving it or not. That element there is definitely where the consultancy can be used to help you set up some of those areas. But like I said, if you don't want the consultancy, then try having a go at doing that yourselves. But importantly, I really want you to go for it. My experience has been across these workshops, we've done nearly 40 of them across the country, has been that there is amazing positivity in these rooms, and people with such enthusiasm and knowledge that really want to take their businesses forward. So grasp what you've done today and really be encouraged by it and use hopefully some of the thinking that you've done to be able to have conversations with others in your business. Like I said, we have now got one-to-one consultancy that we can, that is fully funded through this Defra initiative through the EU conditional aid. It's going to be half a day on farm with you, and then there will be a small report that comes out of that will basically take you on a step further from today. So looking at the different strengths and weaknesses of your business, taking you on from the vision and the focus areas we've come up with today, but coming up with action plans as to how we can improve and negotiate those focus areas. And also, like I said earlier, we would really like to get you together live with some other guys that have been through the initial workshops and then received the consultancy, so that we can look at how we can support you through doing the action plans that come out of that consultancy visit. So I've got another form for you to fill in, and this is the very last one, I promise. What I need you to do is to complete both sides of the form that you've printed out. It asks you for venue, just put webinar in there, and I would like you to try and think about whether you do want this consultancy or not. I would encourage you to take it up because it's fully funded, like I said, so I don't think there's any reason not to. But if you do want the consultancy, you will need to sign this form and send it back to us along with the other paperwork. So you have filled in quite a few worksheets today, and in order for us to be able to prep the consultant effectively and to make sure we don't have to have the same thought process we've been through today, we need you to complete all the worksheets to the best you can, and with that form that you've just filled, that you'll fill in, we would need you to send it back to us in the post to Jackie. The information that you put on those worksheets, I know is confidential to you, and we will only use it to pass it on to the consultant for their use when they're coming out and to talk to you. And it will remain, of course, completely confidential. But that is it for this webinar. Thank you ever so much for staying with us throughout, because I know this is a particularly long webinar. If you've had any issues with downloading the worksheets, if you have any questions on filling any of it out, then please do give us a call. The contact details and for myself and for sending the worksheets back to Jackie will be left up on a screen at the end of this webinar. But thank you very much for listening and for taking part.